It's recording.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to SAP series part 2. For those that were here last week, you remember what SAP stands for. SAP is Sexual Abuse Prevention, which is a topic of highly importance for those that are dealing with children. We know that nowadays the cases of sexual abuse are soaring, and it's really sad to know that 1 in 4 kids are often abused or usually abused before the age of 18. And this is why we decided as Raising Kids for Eternity to create a segment in our meetings for sexual abuse prevention, where we'll be bringing information and studies that we have been putting together on how to protect your children. So last time we talked about some statistics, we talked about the definition of sexual abuse, what SAP had to do with it. If you've missed that lecture, look for it or ask us for the link. It's on YouTube on the Raising Kids for Eternity channel. And I highly recommend that you listen to that introductory message. Now, today on part 2, we will be discussing good touch versus bad touch. And the reason why I wanted to bring that right away is because touch is of high importance in social interaction, right? Regardless of your culture, I know some cultures are a lot more than other. At some point in your life, you're faced with opportunities to give and to receive touch, and that even starts in babyhood. It's a very important aspect in social life. Now, when we talk about the differences between good and bad touch, oftentimes when you are speaking on sexual abuse prevention, you immediately think of touching private body parts. And that's not necessarily what I want to talk about today. We will get into that. But I want you to understand that when you are educating a child for sexual abuse prevention, most of that education is not necessarily talking about sexual acts or sexual intercourse or private body parts, right? It's a much broader context that we need to be aware of. So we're going to be talking about touch that we face in our day-to-day relationships and not necessarily touching your private body parts. So to teach a child the difference between good and bad touch, there are some things that you need to do aside from just giving them the instruction, right? It's not just giving a description. This is a good touch and this is a bad touch. There's a lot more that involves, and I've divided it into a few numbers here. If you're taking notes, this is number 1. To teach a child the difference between good and bad touch, you must, number 1, teach the child how valuable her body is. We are all familiar with the verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20 that says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." So to teach a child sexual abuse prevention, she first needs to understand the value of her body. Her body is not just her body parts. The entire body needs to be protected from bad touches. So you must teach your child also about how to deal and how to touch and how to be touched in her private parts. But that one deserves special attention, but the whole body needs to be understood as sacred, right? Like the verse says, it's the temple of the Holy Spirit. You were bought with your price. We must honor God with your body. So oftentimes what I like to do is compare. For the kids to understand, comparison works very well. So I compare their little bodies with the church, right? The church is a place of respect, a place of reverence, because it's the home of the Holy Spirit, just like the verse says. It's the temple of the Holy Spirit, your body. So I will tell them, when we are at church, we are very reverent. We don't do whatever we want to do at the church. We treat it with care. We treat it with love. We treat it with the highest level of respect, care, and reverence. And therefore, the same is with your body. So when she understands how valuable her body is, then the child will start to understand her value as a person, right? So a lot of times I like to even alert to parts of the body being even more sacred. And that's point number 2. So point number 1, you need to teach your child that her body is valuable. Number 2, you need to teach them that the whole body is valuable, but there are parts that are even more valuable and they need to be protected. And in this case, I like to refer to it as the most holy, right? Your body is holy, but there are parts that are more holy. And I know oftentimes we use the mind, even Ellen White uses the mind when she refers to the part of our body that's the most holy. But I've used it to explain to the kids that the parts that are covered, with double layers of cloth, mommy's breast, your private parts, that is most holy. And that deserves a special care, a special attention, and not everybody can touch it, right? So aside from knowing what kind of touch she should receive, she needs to understand that there are some parts that can and that cannot be touched by others, right? So that's point number 2. Now, point number 3 is a very important one. And I find it that oftentimes parents who are very concerned about sexual abuse, they forget this because it almost allures more to others than to yourself. And that is teaching your child how valuable the body of other people are. We focus sometimes on how we must protect ourselves and how we must do this and not allow people to touch you or look or talk about it, but we forget that a child is not born knowing that she also needs to respect other people. And aside from knowing what kind of touch she should receive, we also need to focus on what kind of touch she should give. So we need to teach your child not to make fun of other people's bodies and not talk about other people's bodies, whether it's big or small, ugly, or we don't talk about it because that's disrespectful, right? So we don't want others to talk about your child's bodies, but you need to teach your child not to do the same for others. And you need to remember that abuse is not only sexual, right? If a child is not taught boundaries in her physical interactions, she can become an abuser, not necessarily a sexual abuser, but she can become an abuser by pushing, by, tugging, by yanking things out of people's hands, and by not being loving with her touches. And God forbid your child ever became an abuser of any sort, even a sexual abuser. But you need to keep that in mind that parents of abusers today, they never thought about it in the past. When they saw their little 2-year-old, they never thought one day you're going to grow up to become a sexual abuser. It doesn't happen that way. And so we need to protect others by instructing our children to prevent them from creating certain characteristics when they grow up. And some may not be sexual abusers, but they may abuse their children. They may abuse their wives in different ways, verbally, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so it's important for us to teach that we must respect others even when they're little. So teaching a child sexual education is to protect herself from an abuser and to protect her from becoming an abuser in the future. Okay, that's point number 3. Now, point number 4, respect your child's body as well as other kids' body. But I will refer to your child's because that's the one who we're dealing the most with. So the child must give and receive touches that respect her non-violated body. And I'm going to start by giving you the example of a baby. Now, babies are cute. They're adorable. And oftentimes we forget that their bodies are not public property. And what do I mean by not being public property? I'll give you an example. How often do you see a stranger approaching a baby with touches, hugs, and kisses, even without the consent of the parents, right? We see that quite often. It's probably happened to you. It's happened to my kids that a stranger, once I was at Walmart and I had my child in my arms and this man who was right behind was like rubbing her head and I didn't feel comfortable. I don't know you. I don't know where you're coming from. But because babies are so cute, we almost have this idea that they're public property and we can just touch them. And we have to remember that not everybody that feels the desire to kiss, to squeeze your child, to pinch their cheek, to rub their hair, to smell your baby's head has the right to do so. It's not public property. And many times adults will feel offended if a parent will stop that or rebuke or take a step back. They feel offended, and we shouldn't feel that way because babies are not public property. Another point is babies that go from one arm to another at birthday parties, during church services. These children don't have the right to manifest their unwillingness to be passed from one to another because they just can't simply communicate. And oftentimes babies will cry and people will walk away from the mom and say, oh, he's just crying because he's seeing you. No, he's crying because he doesn't feel comfortable with you. And so we need to respect a child even when they are babies so that they learn that their bodies are sacred and that they have the right to set boundaries. Another aspect is, and it's happened even in my family circle, that a family member, a close family member, may feel the right to give a kiss on your child's lip. And I think in some cultures that's quite normal, definitely not in mine. And I don't feel comfortable with that. And I feel that more often this is happening, that parents are manifesting this feeling of, grandma comes and gives your child a kiss on the lips. And children should be taught from babyhood that they are not to kiss another child's lip and that they are not to kiss adult lips, that lip kissing is an interaction only between adults, right? And certain adults. You don't go around lip kissing anyone. But when we don't do that by setting the example to the child, then we don't have the grounds to protect them from an abuser by telling them, you shouldn't kiss such and such in the lips. But wait, grandma comes and kisses me, or grandpa comes and kisses me. So don't feel bad by being rude when it comes to protecting your child's body, especially when they can't defend themselves. And I know it is difficult. I've been there, and it has to be done. And I'm going to share you a couple stories of when I didn't do it and when I did it, and the contrast between the two examples. So another way of respecting your child's body, and I know we are here because we're mothers and we care about our children, but oftentimes when we are in a rush, the way we brush their hair is not the way we would like our hairs to be brushed. Or I've been there and I've done this. Your child has a runny nose and they don't like to get their nose wiped. And you basically force them to wipe their nose, and the child is running away from you and screaming and wiggling out of your arms. But because you're a mother and you don't want your kid to walk around with a runny nose, you force that into them. So these are little ways that we're slowly teaching our child that they don't have the right to set boundaries for their body, right? Their physical boundaries and their comfort zones. When you're changing a child's diaper, and I've had kids that don't like to change diapers and they are wiggling out, and you just force them and wipe them, and you're not even very gentle oftentimes because you're in a rush. Those are also ways that we're teaching them that we are not respecting their bodies. And it's not because you're trying to be mean, it's just because you see that as your duty, as your motherly duty, your responsibility. But there are ways that can be done, right? We can explain, I'm doing this for your best interest. You're gonna feel much better when you're clean. When a child is old enough, like mine are old enough now, hand them the Kleenex, have them wipe their nose, teach them how to blow it out. If they're not feeling comfortable, I've also come to the point of letting it run, let it run. It's going to go to the mouth. If they don't mind it, let it run. But don't force those things into kids because they already start realizing I don't have the right to set boundaries to my body. Now, number 5. This is a very important one, okay? So if you leave here and you forget everything I said, remember this one. Teach your child to set boundaries and respect the boundaries they set, right? So it won't help for you to just teach the child, and then when they set their boundaries and you feel embarrassed or uncomfortable, you force them or you brag them or you push them to do your will. So you have to teach them and you have to respect. So oftentimes an adult will ask your child for a type of affection that your child is unwilling to give. And the child will say no, like, such and such, can you give me a hug? Anna, can you give me a hug? And the child will say no. Have you seen adults get like super shocked and offended at the kid's response? I've seen it. And I think that we as adults need to have a bit more maturity to accept and respect the boundaries that a child has set, even if she is refusing to give hugs and kisses to close family members. Now, I'm going to tell you the experience I've had with my youngest child. She's now 3 years old. But when she was born, well, you couldn't quite tell when she was born. When she was about like 6 months, you could tell that her only interest in life was to be with me, right? Her mother. She wanted nothing to do with her dad. She wanted nothing to do with anybody else. She was serious. She wouldn't smile. She would cry if somebody else took her. And my husband was having a hard time with that. I mean, he's her dad. He's been here from day one. He's a very present father. And she wanted nothing to do with him. And my emotional side, because I'm a woman, I started to feel bad for him, but I realized he had the maturity to learn how to respect her. Anytime I would place her in his arms and she would cry, he would say, please take her. She doesn't want to be with me. Please take her. He would try to distract it. If it didn't work, please take her. And I realized that when she was about 10 months old, she started to kiss me. And he saw that, and he would ask her to kiss him. Oh, heavens no, she wouldn't get near his face. And she didn't want to kiss him. And I, for a moment, was trying to encourage that. And I realized this is not going anywhere. And I started to do it myself. Every time he would ask her for a kiss and she wouldn't give it, I would give it. And I would give it and I would give it. And after 3 or 4 times I would give the kiss, she would follow by example. I wasn't forcing her. I was just giving her the example and showing her he is someone you can trust. And slowly they've developed this wonderful relationship. Now she has changed. She's quite the outgoing child now. I don't know what happened to her, but they don't have this issue anymore. But I feel that parents, even fathers and mothers, ought to respect a child's desire until they are ready to show the affection that you're hoping for. So you shouldn't force a kiss. You shouldn't force a hug on a child. Some people will even play mind games and say, oh, if you don't give me a hug, I'm going to be so sad. I'm going to cry. And kids end up yielding to the desire of the adult with the fear of hurting their feelings or of being punished. But if you don't respect your child's physical boundaries and force them to consent to an undesired physical affection, you are placing her in the grounds of abuse already. And why is that? You're placing her in the grounds of abuse because an undesirable touch is already abusive, right? Something that's forced upon somebody else, it's already abusive. So if you want to hug a child, if you want to kiss a child, you must ask first the child if they want to do so. So you approach a child and you say, can I give you a hug today? And if the child says no, your answer should be, well, good job. I'm so glad you're honest. Let me know when you're ready, right? This shows maturity, adult maturity that many people don't have. And I've even seen mothers that will make promise, and not one. I've seen many situations, many mothers that will promise the child a reward if they consent to hugging or kissing somebody that they are unwilling to do so, just so that the mother is not embarrassed because the other adult is expecting that type of affection. So this is very dangerous, and I'm going to explain to you why. Because if a mother says to a child, if you give Uncle Mike a hug, mommy will give you a chocolate when we get home. So the child evidently loves chocolate. She's going to surrender, put down her guards, though she had the right to put them up, cross that social space that she had set for herself just so she can earn that chocolate. Now, do you know that most predators use this very same strategy to get what they want the child to do for them? And so they will often promise to give them a gift. They will almost often promise to do something for them that they know the child likes to. And the child will remember that the mother used to follow the very same pattern. And it's his loving mom he will not think anything negative of it and immediately connect the two and not understand that it's a danger and it's a warning situation, right? So trying to buy your child's affection is placing them in the grounds of future abuse, and it's making them more vulnerable to not understand the danger when there's a predator. It's like basically setting them on a trap, right? So I'm going to tell you an experience that I've had. My oldest child, who is not an introvert, but she's not extremely outgoing. She was about, I think she was almost 3 years old. I think she was close to 3 years old. And I have a friend that lives in the area that I see not very often. Like I will only see her maybe once every 4 months or so. And we usually see each other during the day. So I don't often get to hang out with her husband, who is a very nice person. I mean, this is a nice family, husband and wife, they are very nice. But because we're not usually with the father, my kids are not familiar with him. And they came to the house once as a family when my girl was younger. And you could see the guy was like a child lover. He loved kids, but he was just playing with her and she was fine with it. She felt comfortable after he had been at the house for a while. And then months went by, months. I honestly think she didn't even remember him. And they came to my house. And right at the door, he was trying to get her to give him attention, right? Saying hi to him and hug him. And she was just stopped right next to me. Like, I'm not moving from here. I don't know you. I don't remember you. And he would be like, come on, can you come and give me a hug? And she was just stopped. And after I think 2 or 3 times that he asked her, this guy moved quickly because I think I would have interfered, but I didn't even have any time. He grabbed her and gave her a tight hug. And when he let her go, it was right in front of me, in front of my husband. It wasn't inappropriate, aside from being a forceful hug, which is inappropriate, but it wasn't an inappropriate hug. When he let her go, she clung to me and she wouldn't let me go until that man was out of my house. So after he left, I spoke to her and she said, I did not like that he did that to me. And I said, well, I'm sorry that it happened. I'm sorry I didn't have time to defend you. But you can be sure I'm not going to let this happen anymore, because now I know he would do something like that. I had no idea he was going to do that. Remember, she was almost 3 years old. And today she is 5.5. She has not forgotten this man. Every time I tell her we're meeting with friends such and such, her eyes get big like this and she says, will her daddy be there? And I say, no, he's not going to be there. Mommy, I do not want to see her daddy. I do not want him to hug me. And I said, he's not going to be there. And then recently she asked us to go to her house. And I knew he wasn't going to be there because it was during the day. And I told Lila, I said, Lila, we're going to Tia such and such's house. And she said, I don't want to go. And I said, why don't you want to go? She says, I don't want to go because Mr. Such and such is going to be there. And I said, he's not going to be there. And you can be very sure that if he is ever there, I will not allow this to happen to you anymore. Anyway, I'm just telling you all this because that made me rethink my ways of teaching her how to set boundaries. And that's when I started to read. And I understood that we need to teach our kids to set boundaries even when they're little like that, because adults often won't respect them. And I don't really want to put this against this man. I don't think he knows what he did to her, though I've told his wife that she's terrified of him. And I told her why. I don't think he knew he was going to cause this on her. He really was in a playful way trying to hug her, but it wasn't right. And it has left her with this fear that this could happen to her again. And so we started to learn more about how to set the boundaries. Now, I found an article that was very helpful to me, and it was an article explaining how to set boundaries for even a younger child. So the first step was to find balance between using their manners and letting them set their own boundaries. So how do you set this balance? First of all, they must learn that verbally greeting others is an obligation, right? So if somebody greets you, you must respond verbally, looking at the person's eye loud enough that they understand that you're greeting them back. But they do not have to hug, they do not have to kiss or touch anyone that they are not feeling comfortable with. And I know I'm Latino, and it's a huge challenge because of your circle of family and friends, right? When you see your family during the holidays, you haven't seen them. I'll give the example of myself. We go to Brazil once a year. So people have been seeing my kids on social media. They hear about them from my mom. They hear about all of their stories. They watch their cooking videos. So they feel close to the child. But my kids have absolutely no idea who they are. So we go to Brazil and we get to this family gathering, and there is Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom is very dear to me. He was my uncle. He was a very good uncle. He's always respected me, and I love him very much. And he loves my kids and wants to give them a hug. And there is my child resistant. What do I do? Right? So oftentimes you're tempted to encourage the hug, push, threaten, bribe, and these are not the right actions, right? So when you force a child to cross the boundaries that they have set, you're teaching them that it's more important to be polite or to not come across rude than to listen to their own intuition. So you can't teach a child to say no to an abuser by disrespecting when they say no, even in a safe situation. So you cannot later be like, okay, so if somebody tries to touch you, you have to say no. But wait a second, I didn't want to hug Uncle Tom, and you forced me right in front of him and put me in that very delicate situation. So we have to think that this is preparatory ground for when she is faced in a dangerous situation. So how did I solve the issue of not being embarrassed, but also respecting my child's boundaries that she set? And the lady in the article talked about the 4-letter H, right? Letter H. The first one is a hug. So you may ask, would you like to give Uncle Tom a hug? If the child says no, you move on to the last invasive physical touch, which is a handshake, right? So between a hug and a handshake is a big step. So I would ask her if she says no, and I would right in front of the person, do you want to give this person a handshake? No. How about a high five? And I have to say that about 90% of the time, high five is acceptable because I think it's just so quick that they don't feel like you're invading my personal zone. But I've had situations when she wasn't even ready to give a high five. And so I would look at her and I said, okay, but you can say hello. And then she would look and say hello. Now, this wasn't something that I talked to her there. It's something that it's discussed, that it's instructed ahead of time. You explain to your child, I'm not going to force you to hug. I'm not going to force you to kiss. You don't even have to give a handshake, but it would be nice if you wanted and if you felt comfortable to give the person a high five. But if none of these are an option for you, you must say hello. That's not an option to walk away and hide under mommy's skirt and hide your face. And it's really saved us a lot of trouble. And now I will tell you an experience we had just about 2 months ago. We have another set of friends that used to attend our church, but they didn't come to this church anymore and recently came back. And they saw my 5-year-old grow since she was a little baby. And so he feels close to her, but remember, he hasn't come to church for over a year. And my girl rarely even remembered him. And so we were greeting at the end of the church, and he squatted down to her and he's like, come on, Lila, give me a hug. And I could see she was as stiff as a tree. Like, this is not going anywhere. And so I looked at her and I was like, Lila, would you like to give Uncle such a hug? And she goes, mm-mm. And I said, okay, how about a handshake? And so she said, okay. And she put her hand out for a handshake and he pulled her. But I remembered situation 2 years ago that she was traumatized for life about this uncle, and I pulled her back. And I said, I don't really think she's ready for a hug. But if you're smart enough, I would take that handshake because you're feeling pretty privileged right now. And that became kind of like a joke. And I looked at him and I said, we're practicing setting boundaries for ourselves. And that was it. And I often see parents who will apologize for a child not wanting to hug someone in front of the child. So the child will say, I don't want to give a hug. And you'll be like, okay, then at least say hello. And right in front of the child, say, I am so sorry. She didn't want to hug you. Already giving the child an idea that not hugging is disobedience, right? She's doing something wrong. And it really is not. She should be praised for learning how to set her boundaries. And so when we got to the car, she looked at me and she said, thank you for not letting him help me. I did not like that he was going to do that. And I said, I know. And this is why I stopped him. So I'm always there for you if you always need me. But remember, if I am not there and someone tries to do that, you can very loud say, no, I don't want that, because it is your right to set the boundaries. And I feel that we need to empower our kids from a young age to learn to set these boundaries, to protect them from the attacks of abusers in the future, right? We're moving on to number 6. Number 6 is our last part, and it's a very important one, and it's very practical. Number 6 is, in order to teach your child to protect herself from good and bad touch, you must describe for her the characteristics between good and bad. Good and bad is relative, right? So setting the characteristics and describing the description of a good touch and of a bad touch is key for prevention. And it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it good touch, yes touch, or a happy touch. It doesn't matter what you call, as long as you make the difference between what is respectful and what is not respectful, right? So the bad touch, you can call it the no touch, the sad touch, the bad touch, whatever suits your vocabulary better. Now, what are the characteristics of the good touch? Number 1, it isn't forced on you. It is consented, right? It is asked, would you like this? Yes or no? No, it's done, not touching you, but it's only going to be good if it's consented. So when you start forcing the child to hug someone, it's no longer a good touch, because any touch that's forced, it's not good. Number 2, it does not hurt, right? And I'm not talking about, of course, going to the dentist or getting a shot in the doctor. I'm talking about your interaction with the child. So if I am wiping you and it's hurting, it's not a good touch. If I'm brushing your hair and it's hurting, it's not a good touch. If you are, pushing your brother, it's not a good touch. And teaching them what a good touch is and what a bad touch is. Number 2 is it doesn't hurt. Now, number 3, very important one. Everybody can know about it. A good touch is only good if it's not a secret, right? So anyone can know that I'm rubbing your hair. Anyone can know that I'm giving you a back massage, because it's a good touch. It's not a secret to anyone. Number 4, it makes your heart happy and excited. Now, I know not every time I hug somebody at church makes my heart happy and excited, but it doesn't make me feel sad or it makes me feel bad. And that's something you need to remember. As long as it makes you feel okay and not uncomfortable, it's still a good touch. Now, number 5, it makes you have the desire to have more. And on this point, I will even point tickling. A lot of kids are so cute when they're laughing like crazy at tickles, they giggle. But if the child is telling you stop, 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 and you're continuing, it's no longer a good touch. So if it makes them have the desire to have more and you know when to stop, keep doing it. But if it's not giving them the desire to have more, it's no longer a good touch. So it's something that you want to happen more often and throughout your life. Now, number 6, very important. A good touch can be done in front of anyone. Anyone can see me hug. Anyone can see me kiss you, touch your cheeks, play with your hair. These are good touches, and they're so good that it's good for other people to see them as well. And that's a very important characteristic of a good touch, because oftentimes predators will use this as it has to be on the side. It's just between you and me, okay? Now, last one, it does not leave your child ashamed. So it leaves you at peace and you feel comfortable with it. Anything that makes you feel ashamed, any touch publicly that makes you feel ashamed, it's no longer a good touch. Now, moving on to the characteristics of the bad touch. And I want you to know that the bad touch is not done by bad people or abusive people only. I've told you experiences of two people who are friends of mine. And I know they had the best of their intentions, but they were about to perform bad touches, right? So it can even be done by a mother. It can even be done by a father. It can even be done by grandparents and friends. So characteristic number one of a bad touch, they ask you not to tell anyone. So basically it's the opposite of the good touch. They try to keep it secretive. And the sentence is usually, this is a secret between us, is the standard sentence of the abuser. So when a child hears this concept, it's a warning of abuse, right? Okay, this is gonna be a secret between you. There's no secrets, okay? Mommy has to know what happens to you. And if anybody else is asking you to keep anything secretive, that's a sign of danger. Number two, it's often done in hidden places. It can be in a room, it can be in a bathroom, it can be under bed sheets, it can be even in a circle of friends. You know, a lot of times friends that are bullying in school, they will make a circle to kind of hide what's happening in between, and they're kicking or being aggressive to someone. So a bad touch is often done in hidden places. Number three, it makes you feel sad. It can be painful and it makes your stomach turn, right? When someone touches you and you feel like vomiting, this is a sign that that's not a good touch. It brings you sadness and pain that you don't find with a good touch, because good touches should bring you happiness and a sense of pleasure. Next, number four, it makes you feel ashamed, and importantly, it makes you feel fear of telling others. A lot of times kids will feel all the feelings. They will feel the stomach turning, they will be sad, they will be embarrassed, but they will also have the fear of telling somebody else. And that's when usually they get repeatedly abused because of this sense of shame. What if I tell my mom that this person did this to me? What is she going to think of me? Or I cannot tell my friends. Imagine what they would think of me if they knew. And so they are worried about what other people are going to think of them. And that's a sign that it's a bad touch. And last, it makes your heart feel agony, anger, and oftentimes you feel like crying. Now, these points are points that you need to work with your child. Now, I know some kids have the maturity to understand what abuse is, others do not. You need to be very careful how you deliver this, because you don't want to have your child having nightmares in the middle of the night because they're going to be abused. But you can teach them about touch, not talk about abuse. Teach them only about good touch, and then teach the opposite. What is a good touch? A good touch makes you feel happy. And what would be a bad touch? Oh, a bad touch would make me want to cry. So we don't do bad touches, and we don't allow others to touch us that way. You don't have to talk about private parts, abuser, predators, or any of that. Now, how do you make this interactive with your child? And one way that we've done, and I find it helpful, is to make it visual, right? So we wrote on a piece of paper circumstances in life where good touches were given, right? Laying on mommy's lap and mommy stroking your hair, or a back massage, or a foot massage, a hug to daddy when he gets home from work, a high five to a friend in the park, like good situations, and put them in a jar. And then also wrote negative, right? A forceful hug, or a friend kicking you, somebody pulling your hair, or scenarios. And depending on the maturity of your child, is someone touching your legs. You can even go there, or someone kissing my lips, and you can even put that in the jar. And then you give your child, you can make it simple by a simple yes or no. And so you pick up something from the jar and you go, daddy coming home from work, good touch or bad touch? Give me a hug, good touch or bad touch? And then it'll be good touch or bad touch, you know? Or you can make it more visual by making a little sign. So the sign has two sides. One is a thumbs up and the other is a thumbs down, or it's a happy emoji or a sad emoji, or it can be even the forbidden sign, or a checkbox, which is like the allowed sign. And you can play this game in a group, you know, with a group of kids, or just with your own, in the bathtub. A lot of times we do it in the bathtub. Okay, if mommy If mommy gets mad at you and slaps you as, as a reflex without thinking, good touch or bad touch, and be like, bad touch. How about you fell and mommy came and gave you a kiss in the knee? Good touch. And just practicing that with your child will help them set the difference between a good touch and a bad touch. And before I forget, I want to read to you a quote from Counsels to Parents, Teachers, and Students that's found in page 256. And the reason why I'm going to read this is because I realize that even in the spirit of prophecy, it warns us that oftentimes our leaders in schools, in churches, I had some quotes even about churches where ministers and leaders in schools and churches did not respect boundaries of kids. And if they are not respecting it, we have the job as mothers, as instructors, as teachers, as parents, to help them set these boundaries for themselves. And notice what it says in page 256. The man who stands in a position of responsibility in any of our schools cannot be too careful of his words and his acts. And a man of responsibility in a school could be as simple as a teacher, right? It's not talking about the principal. It could be just a teacher. Notice what it says. Never should he allow the least approach to familiarity in his relations to the students, such as placing his hand on the arm or shoulder of a girl student. It almost seems old-fashioned when we look at the reality of our schools nowadays. But the reality is that it is still inappropriate for a girl to be touched without the consent, or maybe even with her consent, because if she's a child, she cannot really discern by somebody that's placed in a higher position, in a position of responsibility. And so we need to have the job from babyhood to teach our children their bodies are not public property. You have the right to set your boundaries, and I am always there to believe you. And this relationship is a trust relationship that we each need to have with our kids, that they know no matter what happens, mommy and daddy are there for me, and I can open up and I can talk to them. Yesterday, I was approached by someone on Facebook because they saw the advertisement for the SAP series today. And we started to talk, and she mentioned to me that she was abused in the past. And so I asked her if I could ask her some questions. I would never use her name or her situation in any way publicly to expose her. But it was interesting to me that she was abused by two family members in her childhood, and she never told her parents. And I asked her at the end, I said, do you believe that your parents would have believed you if you told them that this was happening to you? And her answer was, maybe not. And so I feel that it's our responsibility to show our kids that we respect them and that we respect the boundaries they set and that we trust them and believe them in order for them to come to us at the first warning sign they receive from someone trying to touch them inappropriately, someone trying to get close to them inappropriately. They must feel that we are a stronghold there, a fort for them to go back to and get the protection that they need, right? And so I pray that as you go through this series, you start using it, evidently appropriately for the age of your child, some of the tips that are given here, because it's never too late and it's never too early to start. We are living in a society where evil is growing and growing speedily. And if today 1 in 4 kids are abused by the age of 18, I can assure you that this number is only going to increase. And it can increase quite rapidly. And it's our job as parents, as friends, as teachers, church members to protect not only our kids, but to be aware of the danger for other kids out there as well. So I pray you're being blessed. I will have a final prayer and then we'll stop the recording and open for questions and comments so that you can feel free, more free to open up. And I will finish up with prayer and we can open up for the discussions. Our Father in heaven, what a blessing it is to have touch as part of our social life. But we know that as just like everything that you have created, Satan has tried to distort it and bring negative things about it. And I pray, Father, that we may be respectful of others and that we may teach our kids to respect others, and that we may also learn how to help our kids to set boundaries and to respect them as well. We know it's sometimes easy to try to please others and to feel that we don't want to be rude and put our kids in situations where they feel uncomfortable, but help us, Father, to remember that their bodies are not ours and it's not even their own. It's your property. You have purchased it with a price and it's holy because it's the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I pray, Jesus, that you may protect our kids. We know we cannot be with them all the time, but we can instruct them so that they can have the necessary tools to fight against the the enemy. And I pray you may protect them when we can't be there, but that you may also help us instruct them to learn how to protect themselves. In Jesus' name, amen.